Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today is November 28th, 2025. Hopefully everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, I don't want to be the party pooper, but I have some very bad news for everyone. According to our mathematical calculation, there's going to be a nuclear exchange between Russia and China alliance and NATO members, and that particular nuclear exchange is coming up really soon. Allow me to elaborate. My name is Alex Dworkin, and I'm a managing partner at 4D Capital. We specialize in a very unique mathematical approach to the stock market, where we analyze the market and individual stocks in multidimensional space, and when we do, essentially perfect order emerges. On top of that, we've developed a number of very powerful timing indicators, and when we combine both of those factors, we can very often predict what the overall stock market and individual stocks will do on multiple time frames, whether it's long-term, short-term, doesn't really matter. Now, what most people fail to understand is that the same mathematical work allows us to predict many other things, including geopolitical events and including wars. And that's exactly what it's telling us. Once again, according to our calculations, this is not prophecy. According to our mathematical calculations, there's going to be a nuclear exchange between Russia and China alliance and NATO members. And we're going to talk about exactly when that's going to happen. That's going to absolutely change the entire Northern Hemisphere. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to prepare you and provide you with the best type of financial analysis that will not only prepare you for what is to come and direct you exactly as we fall into that very dangerous and very unfortunate time frame, but will give you the tools necessary not only to survive this nuclear exchange, but also, I don't want to say prosper during the same period of time, but make sure that things that will unfold in the Northern Hemisphere doesn't happen to your family, is what I'm trying to tell you. So let's jump into it. We're going to look at a number of different very important things, including the upcoming December 13th time turning point, which is very important in our war cycle. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the possible war in Venezuela. We'll talk about the financial analysis. We'll talk about why I believe this whole Venezuela situation is most likely a divergence from what is actually going to happen between the United States and Russia over the next couple of weeks. So we'll discuss that. We'll look at the markets. We'll look at some of the fast movers that we've identified, the stocks that are about to, for example, bottom and then surge much higher going forward. We'll talk about Bitcoin, and all sorts of different things. So I think you're going to find this update quite interesting. So once again, as you know, in terms of the war, there are two, well, at least according to the mainstream media, there is only one general, very important possible war that is about to unfold, which is the war with Venezuela. As you can see on the screen in front of you, that's the latest news. As a few minutes ago, I just pulled it, and there is a number of very important indicators that are suggesting that there's going to be an attack on Venezuela by the United States. I've talked in the past how absolutely crazy it is. This has nothing to do with the drug war. Anybody with half a brain can attest to that. It's all about oil. It's all about taking Venezuela under the umbrella of the United States, regime change, and things of that nature. Okay, it has nothing to do with any drugs. Of course, everybody understands it. There is a battle group that is being currently built within the region, and there are certain indicators suggesting that yes, the attack on Venezuela is coming very soon. But I'm going to talk about this towards the end of this presentation. But there's a real possibility that this is a divergence from what is actually happening out there, and a possible direct involvement between the United States and Russia. We talked about it for quite some time, and this has to do with the December 13th time turning point that I've been talking about it for at least a couple of months. So if you are new to our channel, December 13th is a very important time turning point that is associated with the history of the United States. This has to do with the 84-year war cycle, and this is the same cycle that predicts the eventual nuclear exchange between the East and the West, so to speak. And this cycle hits on exactly December 13th of this year. I typically give it plus or minus 2 weeks associated variance, direct variance, and that means that we are already within this cycle. We are within the margin of error. And if we look at it from that perspective, then most definitely some sort of a conflict with Venezuela that will upset the markets is quite possible. But I would like to introduce another possible theory, and that possible theory has to do, and as I mentioned before, perhaps an attempted decapitation strike by NATO or the United States by default against the Russian Federation. This is a very serious matter. It would be absolutely sheer insanity if that would happen. But nevertheless, that is something we have to pay attention to, because it is quite possible, because this December 13th time cycle is very important in terms of the American history. And the last time it struck was December 7th of 1941, which, as you know, was Pearl Harbor and the official entry of the United States into World War II. So this time turning point is coming up. The stock market is lining up for that as well. We'll talk about that in a second. And well, as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and jump into the financial markets, and I'll summarize exactly what's going on, and we'll go from there. So what you're looking at is a chart for the Dow Jones. It's actually a 90-day chart. Let's zoom into a 20-day chart so we have a little bit better understanding what's going on. So the lines you see here on the chart view is our three-dimensional calculations, and as you can see, they were projecting a very important level here. I'm not going to discuss the extent of our overall forecast, because we are at a very important juncture for financial markets, and if you've been following our work for some time, you know that we've been anticipating a very important bottom. I'm not going to speak to the fact of whether or not this was, I'm sorry, not the bottom, but the top. I'm not going to speak to the fact of whether or not this was the actual top for the market. I'm just going to simply suggest that this particular level you're seeing on the chart in front of you, the lines here, represent our three-dimensional calculations, and they suggest that this was a very important level. So what we've witnessed thus far is essentially a sell-off, correct? If you remember, it really baffles my mind, the psychological setup we're currently experiencing, but everyone was freaking out. The world was ending at this bottom, and all of a sudden we have a bottom here and a bit of a rally, a bounce, so to speak. And now everybody's bullish, and I'll show you some of the projections that everybody's making. So the psychological extremes associated with today's stock markets are some of the most extreme that I've seen in my career. Okay. So a couple of very small points to mention here. So this is the Dow Jones. If we look at the S&P and the NASDAQ, well, I'm not even going to look at the S&P because it is in the middle of, it's kind of midpoint, right, between the NASDAQ and the Dow. So for our purposes, NASDAQ is more important at this point, because as you can see here, we left the same line, same mathematical calculations. It projected the top so far on the NASDAQ perfectly. But what you notice here is this particular gap down and this particular gap down that still need to be filled for the NASDAQ. When I discuss these factors in our work, in our daily updates, for example, I suggested this was a structurally unsound moves by the NASDAQs, and that typically means the market has to come back and close these gaps, and that's actually what we're seeing here right in front of us. Okay, so that's our quick market overview. Short-term work is essentially the same. We'll introduce into our analysis, probably going forward next week, intraday moves or intraday cycles that our system generates, so you can possibly trade the moves going forward before they actually happen. So we'll introduce that on Monday going forward. So one other thing I wanted to do is introduce yet another fast mover to you, and this fast mover is FI, 5 serve. We actually did an analysis on it, I believe, day before Thanksgiving, so Wednesday. So if you go to our channel, you should be able to see that video, a more in-depth analysis of the 5 serve. Let me pull up actually a different chart of it. Okay, so it's very difficult to do an in-depth analysis in these geopolitical videos I'm just going to touch base on it very quickly, and just so if you want an in-depth analysis of Fiserv, I do encourage you to go to our channel and check it out, because this is just going to be a very quick overview. So what you're witnessing here at the top and the bottom of the chart is what we call cycle composites, and this is a very simplistic visual representation of a very complex mathematical concept where we scan the market in three-dimensional chart and project it into the future. So the bottoms represent the bottoms and the tops represent the tops. There are multiples of them. We also use cycle clusters, and I talk about all of that in our analysis there. Okay. Point being is that, let me remove this so it's a little bit easier to see. Point being is that FI is moving into a major bottom. As you can see, it's been a tremendous drop for the stock. And once that bottom is put in place, which is going to happen relatively soon, according to our calculations, time and price calculations, it's going to surge much higher going forward over the next couple of years. So this is the mid-cycle bottom it's falling into, and then subsequently it's going to increase into the mid-cycle top and then mid-cycle full cycle top. I should say, I'm sorry, right here. So if we look at it from a different perspective, different calculations, this is yet another representation of our three-dimensional calculations. I know it doesn't make any sense to you. Please go to see this particular video in more detail, but essentially what you're looking at is the projection of where this stock is going to bottom in both time and price, and our system or our calculations is so powerful. Not only are they able to identify exactly where this stock is going to bottom, for example, in this case, but they're also able to identify exactly what's going to happen thereafter. So let me just unclick this very quickly, and I'm going to show you the projection. So once this bottom projection is achieved, by the next time turning point or by the next major cycle top, we anticipate this stock to reach, into approximately $300 a share at the very least. So from today's levels to there is at least 5x return on investment within a relatively short period of time of 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And in my book, that's a very wonderful opportunity. So how accurate can our cycles be? Let's look at the Bitcoin very quickly. We actually, so this is Bitcoin. If you've been following our work, you know that we've projected the actual top on Bitcoin with incredible precision. We've been projecting a price of 130,000 plus or minus 3,000 for quite some time, I believe since the beginning of this year, 2025, and it hit it perfectly. Okay, so it completed the pattern right here. It hit into the major cycle top, and then it is now declining into a major cycle bottom, which is scheduled for 2026. Amazing accuracy, as you can see. We actually going to be doing a Bitcoin analysis, a full Bitcoin analysis video review next week. I do encourage you to subscribe to our channel so you can see that in full. The bad news is, at least for the Bitcoin bears, I'm sorry, for the Bitcoin bulls, I should say, is the move down hasn't completed yet. It's going to complete in 2026, and we'll actually provide the price of that happening next week when we do the full Bitcoin analysis. Okay, so let's look at some of the news articles, and we'll go from there in terms of the overall analysis for the stock market and what's going on out there with the war. So very quickly, just go through these. I just wanted to show you the complete psychological breakdown of the reality, what's going on in the market. As I mentioned just a week ago, everyone was crying, the stock market was crashing, what's going to happen, the economy is dead. But this is what we see today, just a couple thousand points higher in the Dow Jones, just a simple bounce, I would argue, and this is what you're seeing. So JP Morgan suggests 7,500 on the S&P, which is a reasonable target, I guess, if you anticipate the stock market to continue rallying going forward, which we do not, or even 8,000. Okay, so this is one of them. I guess this is the same thing. One of the nonsensical issues I wanted to kind of point out is this particular article where Ray Dalio and Jeff Gundlach are both suggesting that the stock market is extremely overvalued. We are in a very dangerous period of time, and I would essentially agree with them. But where they're telling, not necessarily being honest, is their conclusion is to buy gold. Okay, and I guess that's been the advice of many people over the years, especially recently. You cannot open a financial channel or they're some of the most, for example, not powerful, but influential people on YouTube. Everyone is talking about gold, how you should allocate capital to gold, buy more gold, so on and so forth. So just I wanted to point out that go back to the gold chart here for a second. So we're looking at, if you're familiar with our work, we've been talking about gold for some time. Obviously, we do the forecast, but these two lines we've been projecting the top. Okay, so we called the top. We were projecting the run on the gold. I'm sorry to begin with, but now we're projecting the top on the gold, or have been projecting the top on the gold. And the lines you see here represent once again our three-dimensional calculations, which suggest that the top was most likely put in place. But essentially what you have to understand is that not in all cases, but gold moves in line to a certain extent, particularly in bear markets. If you want to compare the bear markets between the stock market and the gold, typically they move together. So if we do anticipate a bear market in equities or in the overall stock market, then you can conclude with a very high degree of certainty that something very similar is going to be happening in the gold market due to liquidity issues and so forth. So once again, don't be so gung-ho on gold. Understand it is in a somewhat of a speculative bubble as well as everything else, you can argue. And most likely, if our projections are correct and we do have a significant bear market going forward over the next, for example, 12 months, then gold is likely to decline. And that's what our calculations here show as well. So we've been actually holders of Newman as you can see, we have a very similar situation. We actually came in right at the bottom, but once again, our calculations are also suggesting that there's going to be a very important top on Newman, probably was already in, and then now it's going to decline into a bear market bottom that is scheduled for next year. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's go back here for a second. And let's see what else. Expert who predicted .com crash says Americans could face much bigger crisis soon. Absolutely true. We talked about Warren Buffett indicator. We talked about this Shiller PE ratio. We talked about margin debt, and everything is at extreme levels. And I still believe Shiller PE ratio is probably the easiest way to showcase how crazy expensive market is today compared to other periods of time. And I've talked about it so many times before. This particular spike higher in 2000 at the 2000 top has to be adjusted, and if you adjust it properly, it's the valuations at that point in time was at approximately 35. So if we look back, because most of the most of the tech companies at that time had no earnings, and that's why you have to make that adjustment. And if you do, it's at approximately 35. So which means that today's market is higher than 1929, much higher than 1966 top, higher than 2000 top, 2007 top was all the way down here. So we are at extreme level of speculation pretty much in every metric you look at. And sure, it can continue for a prolonged period of time. Earnings can catch up. You know the drill, right? That's what everybody's talking about. That's why some of the big houses are projecting the S&P to reach 7,500, 8,000 going into next year. But you have to be very, very careful. And as I indicated earlier, our analytical setup suggests that there's going to be a significant top in the market, and that top is going to happen very, very soon. And this December 13th time turning point, which brings us back to the war analysis, is once again very, very important. And it suggests a major disruption in the market. Okay, so yes, we can have a disruption with Venezuela war. I think if President Trump decides to go into Venezuela, it's going to be a major disastrous mistake for this administration, because I don't think it's going to be as easy as everybody, or at least this administration, believes it's going to be. It's going to be a trap, and they're going to be stuck in there for a long period of time. and suffer quite significant losses because Venezuela is not run. It is currently being supported by Russia to a certain extent. They have advanced weapons. The country is huge. The terrain is not good for any sort of a combat. It's very similar to what Vietnam was. So if you look at it from simply military perspective, it's going to be a complete disaster. It's not going to be a decapitation strike. But what worries me the most, because our work does suggest a spike in volatility, significant volatility in that December 13th time turning point, plus or minus 2 weeks. But what worries us is that quite possibly Venezuela cannot deliver this kind of volatility for financial markets. So it is quite possible that our secondary scenario, that there is going to be an attempted decapitation strike against Russia by the United States or NATO, pick your name, it's the same entity, right? Is quite possible. I know it sounds crazy. I know it would be an absolute insane thing to do because once again, Russia is not any of the countries. They have over 4,000 nuclear weapons and probably half of them pointing at the United States. But nevertheless, if we look at what happened in the past, particularly how this administration behaved itself with Iran, how Israel behaved, because Israel by extension is an arm of the United States. I know many people would argue it's a flip of that, right? The United States is the arm of Israel, but it doesn't really matter. They're working together. And what you've witnessed as a pattern over the last couple of weeks is that they go into these so-called peace negotiations, whether it's with Iran or Hezbollah or Hamas, and then they strike, okay? So in that regard, this particular region or this particular setup with Venezuela and what's been proposed in Ukraine, which has been basically rejected not only by Ukraine but by Russia and everybody who's involved in that conflict directly. We'll talk about that here in a second. But the pattern is you introduce all of those things to cool things off, so to speak, and then you strike, right? And the stock market with its bounce is lining up into that December 13th time turning point. Once again, we're already within that window. And this particular setup with Venezuela could be a divergence built against Russia, or at least the perception that something big is happening or about to happen in Venezuela, but the real deal is currently being built up in the European Union as a direct strike against the Russian Federation. So if I was a Russian military machine or the Russian Federation, I would be very careful at this point in time because something very, very aggressive or bad can happen going forward, okay? So that is something to look for. In terms of this peace plan, it's been dead on arrival. I failed to cover it over the last couple of days because I wasn't recording videos, but as you know, it's basically a non-starter. President Putin did a presentation over the last 24 hours where he talked about all of the things that Russia wants to accomplish. And another very important point I wanted to mention is that understand the United States can stop this war with one phone call. This is not the war between Ukraine and Russia. This is war between NATO, the United States, and Russia. Okay, everybody understands that. So Ukraine is simply being used as a proxy. So if the United States says jump, the Ukrainians ask how high. Okay, so in reality, that's why I'm really, really worried about this possible decapitation attempt against the Russian Federation. Is because if the United States really wanted to end this war, they can do it in 24 hours. They simply tell Zelensky it's over, it's done. But as I mentioned so many times before, this is not the goal of the United States. This is not the goal of the United States military-industrial complex, and I guess you can say European Union by default. Their goal is very simple. They've published papers, all of the think tanks in Washington they're pretty much on the same page and they've published papers. So their objective, long-term objective, is to decapitate Russia, do a regime change in Russia, bring it down, break it into smaller parts, and then essentially rape and pillage Russia of its natural resources to enrich the West. Okay, so that's their primary objective, and then move on to China thereafter, because they cannot do both fronts at the same time. China is, you can argue, much powerful, but if they take Russia off the chessboard, I'm sorry, they can essentially do that. Okay, so the objective is very clear. It's not dependent on who's sitting in the White House. It's a long-term objective of the United States. The Russians understand it. Most people actually, most Americans do not understand it, exactly what's going on, but that's the bottom line. So if they wanted to, they can end the war. They have the ability, but they're not doing that. Quite the opposite, right? The strikes against the Russian Federation with these long-range weapons have been increasing recently. They've been hitting a lot of the oil facilities with precision that can only be supplied by Western intelligence, and actually either the British or the United States pulling the trigger. So all of those things are indicative of something's popping off in Russia over the next couple of weeks, presumably with this December 13th time turning point. So for me personally, it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not it's going to be Venezuela or Russia, or perhaps both at the same time. But something that's deep inside of me is telling that it's going to be Russia, because this December 13th time turning point is very, very important, very, very powerful, and long-term in nature. So it's, I should say, it's going to be a historic turning point for the United States. And while Venezuela can deliver it, possibly because of the U.S. involvement and perhaps getting sucked into a long-term war in Venezuela, I believe a direct conflict with Russia, perhaps a decapitation strike, can deliver that caliber of a problem for the United States going forward, that our work in this particular time turning point of December 13th indicates. Okay, so let's see what else we have. 28 points is just complete garbage, complete nonsense. Zelensky, this has just happened. Ukraine is done. I mean, if you follow the front, the Ukrainian front line is collapsing. There is mass surrender going on. Nobody wants to die for Zelensky. Nobody wants to die for the United States. The people are beginning to understand exactly what's happening there. Zelensky's coming out and saying they're not going to give up any territory. He's, I don't want to curse in this video, perhaps in the next one, but you know my thoughts on this human garbage. So it's a very unfortunate situation for the Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, and unfortunately it's not going to get any better. That's yet another reason why I believe there's going to be a possible decapitation attempt against the Russian Federation, because that's the only way they can win current war, is to strike at Russia and hope that they're successful. In that case, the war ends. Ukraine, so to speak, quote unquote, wins, at least gets its territory back. Russia is defeated. Russia is broken into different parts, and then the whole thing is a major victory for the United States. On the flip side, if they're unsuccessful in such an attempt, obviously there's going to be a significant reprisal, and possibly in a nuclear form against possibly bases within the region, the United States bases or NATO bases within the region, or perhaps even in our homeland, direct strike against the US, if you will. So, point being, I kind of mumbled on for quite a bit of time. Point being is that we are in a very dangerous situation. The stock market confirms it. This December 13th time turning point is very important. A historic time turning point for the United States going forward, and we're not being set up in the proper way, whether you take Venezuela or you look at Russia and the whole Ukrainian situation. Something terrible is about to happen, I believe, and that's going to be reflected in financial markets. But to a more important extent, it's going to bring us one step closer to that nuclear war that we talked about. It's not going to happen this December 13th. We still have a bit of time. There's going to be a description, or there's going to be a link to my book where I outline exactly when that time turning point is for the nuclear exchange. We still have a bit of time to prepare, but if you're interested, please click on the link, get the book, and you'll find out exactly when that nuclear exchange between the Russian Federation, Russia-China alliance, and NATO will take place, because it's going to change the history going forward, for not only for the Northern Hemisphere as we speak, but for the entire human civilization. It's going to be that bad. Okay. So on that note, thank you very much for your time. We still working on this concept, as you can tell. We'll tighten it up over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be a great analysis going forward. So do sign up, and we'll be back on Monday with yet another financial analysis. Probably going to be looking at Nike, maybe Bitcoin, and yet another geopolitical video. Thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful weekend ahead. Bye-bye.